It was just another day in a crowded courtroom, the kind where lives are changed with the bang of a gavel, and justice often feels like it walks in wearing a blindfold, but not always for the right reasons. The judge sat high on the bench, his expression unreadable but his mind already made up. To him, the case was simple. A young black teenager was brought before him, and whether he'd admit it or not, the boy's skin color spoke louder to the judge than any piece of evidence ever could. The room was quiet, filled with tension so thick you could feel it pressing on your chest. The boy stood there, calm, shoulders back, eyes steady. He didn't say much at first, he just looked at the judge. Not with fear, not with anger, but with something deeper. Something that made the judge shift in his seat, just a little. But still, his fingers curled around the edge of his desk, ready to hand down a sentence he'd already rehearsed in his head. You see, the judge wasn't known for being fair. He had a history, one not written in law books but whispered in the hallways. He'd always seen things in black and white, and not just on paper. So, when this teenager was brought in, it didn't matter what the details were. In the judge's mind, the ending was already written. But then the boy opened his mouth and said 2 words. Just 2. And everything changed. The room shifted. You could feel it. Even the guards near the back straightened up. The judge leaned forward, suddenly unsure. Those words weren't aggressive, they weren't even loud, but they carried a weight that hit the judge like a truck. This wasn't just a courtroom anymore. This was a moment, one that no one saw coming. But let's rewind for a moment because this story didn't actually start here. It began weeks earlier on a crowded city bus. Same kind of tension, same kind of silence. A young black teen, the same one now standing in court, was sitting near the back, headphones in, eyes half closed, just trying to make it through another day. Across the aisle, people came and went. Nothing unusual. Until she stepped on. She was a white woman, pregnant, holding her belly like a shield and scanning the bus for a seat. Her face looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from more than just carrying a child. Passengers glanced at her, then looked away. No one moved. No one offered her a spot. Except him. He stood up without a word, without even thinking about Tresu, just a small act of kindness, something you'd expect to matter to no one. But the way she looked at him, there was something else there. She sat down with a grateful smile, but when she handed him a small folded note before stepping off, few stops later, he had no idea it would lead to this very moment in court. And that note changed everything. But right now, the judge doesn't know all that. All he knows is that this boy just said something that's made him stop cold. For the first time in a long time, he doesn't know what to say next. He's looking at the boy differently now. Not like another number in the system, not like another kid he can wave away, but like someone real, someone with a story. And what was in that note? What could one small piece of paper possibly say that would bring 2 strangers from completely different worlds together in a way that would shake the system to its core? That part's coming. But for now, all we know is this. The judge's hand is frozen in the air, the courtroom is dead silent, and the boy just changed the game with 2 words. What he said and what happens next might just be the thing no one saw coming. The judge stared at the boy, eyes narrowed, lips slightly parted. He had heard those 2 words before, but not like this. Not in a place like this, and definitely not from someone like him. The courtroom, which moments ago was just following routine, had turned into a scene frozen in time. Everyone waited. The prosecutor stopped flipping papers. The defense attorney glanced sideways. Even the bailiff, a man usually unfazed by drama, looked like he'd missed something big, but the boy said nothing else. He just stood there, calm, still, watching the judge almost like he was the one deciding something now. A few weeks earlier, this boy was just another student in a school nobody paid attention to. He lived in a neighborhood most people never visited unless they had to. His name rarely showed up in headlines or on honor rolls, but not because he wasn't smart. He was. Smarter than most people gave him credit for. But life didn't make room for kids like him to shine. Not easily. His mom worked nights, always came home tired but smiling. She told him to stay out of trouble, to be better than the world expected. And he tried. Every single day, he tried. But being young and black in his city came with its own list of rules. Unspoken but dangerous if ignored. Don't run, don't argue, don't be too loud, don't look suspicious. And above all, don't forget that people will judge you before you even speak. That morning on the bus, he didn't wake up planning to do anything special. He just wanted to get to school, pass his math quiz, maybe make it to basketball practice. When he saw the pregnant woman step onto the crowded bus, he didn't hesitate. He stood up and offered her his seat, like his mom had taught him. Like, it was just the right thing to do. She looked at him surprised, then thankful, and took the seat with a small sigh. They didn't exchange words. But as she stood to get off a few stops later, she turned to him, touched his shoulder lightly, and handed him a folded piece of paper. Just like that, she was gone. He didn't open it right away. It felt personal, kind of strange. But later, alone on a school bench, he finally unfolded the note. It said, "I don't know you, but I believe in you. Please don't let the world tell you who you are. This seat meant more to me than you know. If you ever need help, truly need it, find me." At the bottom was her name, Claire Hastings. He didn't know what to make of it. Was it just a kind thank you? Or was there something else behind her words? He kept the note in his backpack. Unsure why, but it felt like something important. 2 days later, everything changed. He was walking home from school when sirens cut through the air. A police cruiser swerved up onto the sidewalk, lights flashing. Officers jumped out, shouting, pointing. Someone had reported a robbery nearby. The suspect was young, male, black, wearing a hoodie. That was all they needed. He tried to explain, tried to show them his school books, his ID, anything. But once cuffs were on, words didn't matter. He spent a night in holding, then 2. No one came to ask what had really happened. His public defender seemed distracted, overworked, like he'd already lost cases like this 100 times before. The court date was set, and that's how he ended up standing before Judge Reynolds. Judge Reynolds had a reputation. He'd been on the bench for years and was known for being tough on crime. Some called it justice. Others knew it by another name. His courtroom had seen too many young black and brown kids come through its doors, and too few walk out with their dignity intact. He rarely asked questions. He didn't need to. His mind was made up the second someone walked through the door, until now. Because now Judge Reynolds was staring at this boy, this quiet, composed teen, and wondering what he just heard, and more importantly, why it was affecting him the way it did. The 2 words the boy spoke weren't threatening, they weren't defensive, they were simple, but they cut deep, maybe because they reminded the judge of something he thought he'd buried a long time ago. And the boy? He wasn't trying to play any games. He wasn't here to beg. He was tired. Tired of being misunderstood, mislabeled, misjudged. He just wanted to be seen, really seen, for the first time in a long time. The courtroom stayed still. Somewhere in the back, a woman clutched her purse tighter. A reporter scribbled something in a notebook. But all eyes were on the bench, where Judge Reynolds sat, breathing slow and heavy. What no one in that room knew was that Judge Reynolds had a past of his own. Before the robe, before the gavel, he had once been a man trying to prove himself. He'd built his career on image, on decisions that kept his name out of controversy and inside the favor of those who mattered. Somewhere along the way, he stopped, listening to stories and only looked at files. He stopped seeing people and started seeing statistics. But today was different. That boy didn't look like just another case. He looked like a question, a challenge, maybe even a mirror. And those 2 words? They weren't meant to scare. They weren't meant to win. They were just the truth. Spoken, clearly, without fear, without apology. Still, the judge didn't speak. He didn't reach for his pen. He didn't move to deliver the sentence. Something was happening, and the note in the boy's pocket and that note from a stranger on a bus still rested inside his jacket. He hadn't shown it yet. He hadn't said her name, but he was ready, if he had to, because what she wrote that day, it wasn't just words, it was a lifeline, and he might need it now more than ever. The silence in the courtroom wasn't just awkward, it was loaded. Like everyone sensed something unexpected was unfolding, but no one knew what it meant yet. The boy looked around once, briefly, then returned his gaze to the judge, still steady, still silent. And then, the door at the back of the courtroom opened. Someone stepped in, eyes turned, but before anyone could react, the judge leaned forward and said one word, the same word he hadn't used in years. Not in this way, not with this tone. And just like that, the story took a turn. But not the one anyone expected. Not yet. Because this isn't over. Not even close. The person who stepped into the courtroom was a woman. Not loud, not rushing. But her presence shifted the air the moment she walked in. Dressed simply, but there was something about her. The way she held her head high, the way her eyes scanned the room with quiet purpose. Some people turned to look, others just glanced, but the boy saw her. His chest tightened for a second. It was her. Claire Hastings. She had come. No one knew who she was yet. The clerk at the back looked confused. The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. But the boy just watched, saying nothing. Claire found a seat near the back and sat down slowly, folding her hands in her lap. Her eyes met the boy's for just a second, and she gave him the smallest nod. That was all. The judge noticed too. His gaze flickered toward her, but he didn't say a word. His voice came out finally, low, rough. "Repeat what you just said," he told the boy, and the boy did. The same two words, Claire Hastings. That was all he had said before, just her name. The courtroom didn't understand. It sounded like nothing. But to the judge, it meant something. He didn't show it, not right away. But behind the stare, behind the posture, something was turning over. There were questions in his eyes now, a rare thing for a man used to answers. The key. Prosecutor stood up, trying to regain control of the room. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this isn't relevant." But the judge held up a hand, silencing him. He looked back at the boy. "How do you know that name?" "She gave me a note," the boy replied. "On a bus." That sentence hung in the air. No one knew what to do with it. A note? A name? What did that have to do with the robbery he was accused of? But there was more going on here. Because Claire Hastings wasn't just a random stranger. She had a story too. One most people didn't know. A few years ago, she'd been a defense attorney. Not a famous one, but a good one. Respected. She had stepped away from law after a personal tragedy. A case that went wrong. A boy who didn't get justice. It haunted her. Since then, she'd mostly stayed out of the spotlight, doing small work in community centers and shelters. She never stopped caring. She just stopped being seen. Until now. Her name meant something to the judge. They'd crossed paths once. Long. Ago. Different cases, different lives. But she had challenged him back then in a courtroom just like this. She'd made a case for a boy with no chances left, and she'd almost won. Almost, but not quite. He never forgot her. Now here she was, quietly sitting in the back, and somehow connected to the boy standing before him. It didn't make sense. Not yet. But the pieces were starting to press against each other. Meanwhile, the boy's mom sat 2 rows behind the defense table. Her hands were clenched in her lap, knuckles white. She hadn't seen the note. Didn't know about the woman. All she knew was that her son had been locked up for something he didn't do, and no one wanted to listen. And then there was the real thief, the actual person who committed the robbery the boy was accused of. Still out there, still free. The police had gone off a vague description and a hoodie, and that was enough to bring her son in. No fingerprints, no camera footage, just a guess. But once the accusation was made, the system started moving, fast and without breaks. The defense attorney, Mr. Ramos, wasn't young. He'd been doing this work for years, too many. He'd seen boys like this, smart, quiet, tired, and knew how easily they could disappear into the system. He hadn't believed in the case when he first got it. Another kid, another file. But something about this one felt different. The way the boy spoke, the way he carried himself. And now this woman, Claire Hastings, showing up without warning. Ramos could feel it in his gut. There was more to this story. He leaned over and whispered, "Do you want me to call her to the stand?" The boy shook his head. Not yet. He wanted to wait. Let it play out a little longer. Because he knew what was in that note. And he knew Claire didn't just write things like that lightly. She meant every word. If she had come, it was for a reason. And it wasn't just about him. Outside the courthouse, a group of students had gathered. Some of them knew the boy. One of them had even posted about his arrest on social media. It started getting attention. Not viral, but enough. Comments like, "He's not like that. He helped tutor my little brother, they got the wrong guy." Small voices, but real ones. People were starting to ask questions. Back inside, Judge Reynolds was quiet again. He tapped a pen against his desk slowly. Claire sat still, watching. She didn't move to speak. Not yet. But she knew the judge was thinking. Really thinking. Maybe for the first time in years. That's why she came. Not just to support the boy, but to remind this courtroom, and the man who ran it, that justice wasn't about assumptions. It was about truth. The judge finally spoke. "We'll take a short recess." His voice was flat, but his mind was racing. As people started standing, Claire stayed in her seat. She could feel it. Something was shifting. The boy looked back at her once before the bailiff let him out. Their eyes met again, and just like that, the courtroom began to empty, one slow footstep at a time. But the story wasn't slowing down, because someone had just called the DA's office, and someone else had just found a piece of security footage. From a shop near the robbery scene, a blurry image, a figure in a hoodie, but not the same boy now sitting in a courtroom waiting. And that meant the truth was closer than anyone thought. But it hadn't come out yet, and time was running out.